Welcome to PL-300, Semantic Models, Relationships, DAX, and Performance. This is a focused 35-question practice session, not a full exam simulation. Work each scenario before the answer is revealed. For every question, use 4 phases. Read the complete scenario and choices. Lock in your answer during the silent countdown. Review the correct answer. Then use the reasoning and exam clue to strengthen transfer. Matching and ordering questions keep every control visible while the solution is resolved. Question 1. An organization's data warehouse contains a governed dim date table. You are building an import model that will use classic DAX time intelligence. Dim date must become the model's common date table. Arrange the 3 required actions in the order they should be performed. Select and order 3 actions. Available actions. A. Relate the fact tables directly to one another before loading dim date. B. Mark dim date as a date table by selecting the validated date column. C. Verify that its date column has a date data type, unique non-blank values, no missing dates, and spans full years. D. Connect to the governed dim date table with Power Query and load it into the model. E. Enable auto date/time for every fact table date column instead of using dim date. The correct order is: first, D. Connect to the governed dim date table with Power Query and load it into the model. Second, C. Verify that its date column has a date data type, unique non-blank values, no missing dates, and spans full years. Third, B. Mark dim date as a date table by selecting the validated date column. The unused actions are: A. Relate the fact tables directly to one another before loading dim date. E. Enable auto date/time for every fact table date column instead of using dim date. When a warehouse already provides a date dimension, Microsoft recommends using it as the source of the model date table. After loading it, verify the required date column properties. Because the scenario uses classic time intelligence, mark the validated table as a date table. Auto date/time does not provide the requested single common table, and fact-to-fact relationships do not establish the governed date dimension. Exam clue. For a governed warehouse date dimension, connect and validate it first. When classic time intelligence is used, mark the table with its qualifying date column afterward. Question 2. A semantic model has a sales table containing order date values. You need a model table with 1 row for every contiguous date from the earliest order date through the latest order date. The table must be stored in the model and recalculated when sales refreshes. In Power BI Desktop, you select New Table and enter Date equals Calendar, Min Order Date column in Sales, Max Order Date column in Sales. Does the solution meet the requirement? Answer choices: A. Yes. B. No. The correct answer is A. Yes. Yes. Calendar returns a single column table containing a contiguous set of dates from the specified start date through end date. Used with New Table, the table returning DAX expression creates a calculated table stored in the model. Calculated tables based on model data are recalculated when their source tables refresh. Exam clue. A calculated table requires a DAX expression that returns a table object. Calendar is appropriate when that object must contain every date between dynamic, model-derived boundaries. Question 3. In Power B1 Desktop, you need a running total measure for sales amount column in Sales by Date column in Date. You want Power B1 to generate the DAX from inputs in a dialog instead of writing the expression manually. Which 2 actions should you perform? Select 2 answers. Answer choices: A. Open the menu for a field in the data pane or a value in a visual's values well and select New Quick Measure. B. change the default summarization of sales amount column in sales to do not summarize. C. In the Quick Measures window, select Running Total and supply Sales Amount column in Sales as the base value and Date column in Date as the field. D. In Model View, create a calculation group and add a selected measure calculation item. The correct answers are A. Open the menu for a field in the data pane or a value in a visual's values well and select New Quick Measure. C. In the Quick Measures window, select Running Total and supply Sales Amount column in Sales as the base value and Date column in Date as the field. New Quick Measure opens the Quick Measures window. You then select a supported calculation, such as Running Total, and provide the required base value and field. Power BI generates the DAX behind the Quick Measure, which you can inspect after creation. Exam clue. When the requirement is to generate a supported common calculation from selected fields, start with New Quick Measure and configure the calculation's input wells. Question 4. A planning model already contains product and region tables. The model must add a materialized table that contains every product region combination by applying a DAX cross-join to those existing model tables. The result should be stored in the model and recalculated when its source tables are refreshed. Which calculation type should you use? Answer choices. A. A visual calculation. B. A calculated column. C. A calculated table. D. A measure. The correct answer is C. A calculated table. Use a calculated table. Microsoft documents calculated tables as DAX-defined tables based on data already in the model and specifically identifies cross-join as an example. Calculated tables are stored in the model and are recalculated when their source tables refresh. Exam clue. When the required DAX result is a table object that must become part of the semantic model, choose a calculated table rather than a scalar column or measure. Question 5. A logistics model has a shipments table with numeric freight amount and delay days columns. You must create one measure that totals freight charges and another that returns the arithmetic mean of delay days. Both measures must respond to report filters. Which two DAX measures meet the requirements? Select two answers. Answer choices. A. Total freight equals sum freight amount column in shipments. B. Total freight equals count freight amount column in shipments. C. Average delay days equals max delay days column in shipments. D. Average delay days equals average delay days column in shipments. The correct answers are A. Total freight equals sum freight amount column in shipments. D. Average delay days equals average delay days column in shipments. Sum returns the total of freight amount, and average returns the arithmetic mean of delay days. As measures, both calculations are evaluated for the current report filter context. Exam clue. Separate the business requirements before selecting functions. A monetary total and a numeric mean require different single aggregators, even when both are measures over the same fact table. Question 6. You are configuring three independent relationships in a Power BI semantic model. Match each requirement to the relationship configuration that satisfies it. Match each target to one configuration. Each configuration may be used once or not at all. Requirements. 1. Salesperson already filters a salesperson region bridge. Region key column in region is unique. The bridge key repeats, and filters must continue from the bridge into region. 2. Category column in product and category column in quarterly campaign both contain duplicates, and campaign selections must filter products without reverse propagation. 3. Product key column in product is unique. Product key column in sales repeats. And product must filter sales without reverse propagation. Available targets. A. Many-to-many with single filtering from quarterly campaign to product. B. One-to-many with single filtering from the one side to the many side. C. One-to-one with both cross-filtering. D. One-to-many with both cross-filtering. The correct matches are: Requirement 1 maps to D, one-to-many with both cross-filtering. Requirement 2 maps to A, many-to-many with single filtering from quarterly campaign to product. Requirement 3 maps to B, one-to-many with single filtering from the one side to the many side. The unused target is C, one-to-one with both cross-filtering. The product to sales requirement uses one-to-many because product key is unique only in product, and single provides the required direction. The campaign to product requirement uses many-to-many because neither category column is unique. A single direction can be oriented from quarterly campaign to product. The bridge to region requirement uses one-to-many because region is the one side, but both is needed so a filter arriving at the bridge's many side can propagate back to region. The one-to-one with both cross-filtering option is unused because none of the pairs has unique values on both sides. Exam clue: determine cardinality from uniqueness first, then set direction from the required filter path. Bridge designs are a common reason to permit both on a specific relationship. Question 7. An account snapshot table records an account balance only when a statement is posted, so some dates have no row. An existing recorded balance measure sums account balances and returns blank when the current date has no snapshot. For any selected date range, a new measure must return recorded balance measure evaluated at the latest date in that range for which the measure is not blank. Which DAX expression should you use? Answer choices. A. Latest recorded balance equals last non-blank value, date column in date recorded balance measure. B. Latest recorded balance equals last date, date column in date. C. Latest recorded balance equals sum, balance column in account snapshot. D. Latest recorded balance equals closing balance month, recorded balance measure, date column in date. The correct answer is A. Latest recorded balance equals last non-blank value, date column in date recorded balance measure. Last non-blank value iterates the date values and returns recorded balance measure evaluated at the last date where that expression is not blank. This preserves the snapshot nature of the balance while handling gaps in the snapshot dates. Exam clue: when snapshot dates can be missing, distinguish the last calendar date from the last date where the balance expression actually returns data. Question 8. A customers table has exactly one row for each customer key. A sales table can contain many rows for the same customer key. A customer slicer must filter sales, but filters applied to sales must not propagate back to customers. Proposed solution: create a one-to-many relationship from customers to sales and set the cross-filter direction to single from customers to sales. Does the solution meet the requirements? Answer choices. A. Yes. B. No. The correct answer is A. Yes. Customers is the one side because customer key is unique there, while sales is the many side because the key repeats. Single direction filtering from customers to sales lets a customer selection filter fact rows without allowing sales filters to propagate back. Exam clue: place the table with the unique key on the one side, then choose single when only the dimension should filter the fact table. Question 9. A report already has a revenue measure, You need a blue revenue measure that always evaluates revenue measure for blue products, replacing any existing filter on color column in product while retaining filters on other columns. You create the following measure. Blue revenue equals calculate, revenue measure, color column in product equals blue. Does the solution meet the requirement? Answer choices. A, yes. B, no. The correct answer is A, yes. Yes, calculate modifies the filter context for revenue measure. When the color column is already filtered, the Boolean filter, color column in product equals blue, replaces the existing filter on that same column by default. Filters on other columns remain unless another filter argument changes them. Exam clue. A normal calculate filter replaces existing filters on these same columns. Wrap the filter in keep filters when the requirement is intersection instead of replacement. Question 10. A sales table contains order date and ship date. A report page must provide separate order date and ship date slicers, and users must be able to filter by both roles at the same time. The model currently has one date table. Which two actions should you take? Select two answers. Answer choices. A. Set both relationships from the original date table to bidirectional, so that both become active. B. Create an active relationship from each role-playing date table to its corresponding sales date column. C. Create a second instance of the date table and name the two role-playing tables order date and ship date. D. Create two active relationships from the original date table to sales, one for each date column. E. Keep one active relationship and one inactive relationship, and use only columns from the single date table in both slicers. The correct answers are B. Create an active relationship from each role-playing date table to its corresponding sales date column. C. Create a second instance of the date table and name the two role-playing tables order date and ship date. Only one active filter propagation path can exist between the same two model tables. Two role-playing date tables allow order date and ship date to each have an active relationship to sales, which supports simultaneous filtering by both roles. Exam clue. When users need simultaneous independent filtering by two roles of one dimension, create separate role-playing table instances with active relationships. Question 11. Performance Analyzer shows that a matrix spends most of its load time in the DAX query. The matrix uses the rolling margin measure. You want to edit and evaluate a candidate formula by month without repeatedly creating a temporary report visual, and you do not want to overwrite the model measure until the results are correct. What should you do? Answer choices. A. In DAX Query View, define a query-scoped version of rolling margin measure, run an evaluate query, and update the model only after validating the results. B. Open Power Query Editor and use Query Diagnostics to rewrite the DAX measure. C. Change the matrix to a table visual and use its visual display duration as the measure result. D. Create a calculated column that repeats rolling margin measure on every fact row and compare that column in data view. The correct answer is A. In DAX Query View, define a query-scoped version of rolling margin measure, run an evaluate query, and update the model only after validating the results. DAX Query View supports define measure for query-scoped measures, allowing a candidate formula to be run and evaluated without immediately changing the semantic model. After validation, CodeLens or Update Model with Changes can overwrite the existing model measure. Exam clue. Use a query-scoped define measure in DAX Query View to test measure changes before choosing to update the model. Question 12. A collections report uses an accounts table that already contains balance and credit limit columns. Report authors need a risk band field computed row by row from those columns. Users must be able to place risk band on slicers and matrix rows, and the values may remain static between data refreshes. Which model calculation should you create? Answer choices. A. A calculated table that summarizes accounts. B. A measure in the accounts table. C. A calculated column in the accounts table. D. A visual calculation on each report visual. The correct answer is C. A calculated column in the accounts table. A calculated column fits because it extends an existing table by evaluating DAX row by row, is calculated and stored during refresh, and can be used in slicers, filters, rows, and columns on visuals. Exam clue. A row-level value that must behave like a field in slicers or grouping axes is a calculated column use case. An interaction-sensitive aggregate is usually a measured use case. Question 13. A semantic model has a valid date table and many explicit measures, including sales amount measure, gross margin measure, and units sold measure. You are creating a time comparison calculation group so that the same calculation items can transform whichever explicit measure is in context. Match each calculation item requirement to its DAX expression. Each expression can be used once. One expression will remain unused. Requirements. 1. Return the difference between the current selected measure and its same period prior year value. 2. Return the selected measure for the same period 1 year earlier. 3. Return the current selected measure without changing its date context. Available targets. A. Selected measure minus calculate selected measure same period last year. Date column in date. B. Calculate selected measure same period last year. Date column in date. C. Selected measure. D. Selected measure name. The correct matches are: Requirement 1 maps to A. Selected measure minus calculate selected measure same period last year. Date column in date. Requirement 2 maps to B. Calculate selected measure same period last year. Date column in date. Requirement 3 maps to C. Selected measure. The unused target is D. Selected measure name. Selected measure is the placeholder for the measure currently in calculation item context. Used alone, it returns the current value. Wrapping it in calculate with same period last year evaluates that measure over the prior year date set. Subtracting that prior year expression from the current selected measure returns the year-over-year difference. Selected measure name returns the measure name as text, not its numeric value. Exam clue. In a calculation item, treat selected measure as a reusable measure placeholder. Then apply the same filter context transformation or arithmetic pattern to it. Question 14. A matrix groups sales amount measure by category column in product. Page filters can also filter year column in date, region column in geography, and brand column in product. You need a denominator measure that ignores only the current filter on the category column in product, while preserving all the other filters. Which DAX expression should you use? Answer choices. A. Calculate. Sales amount measure, remove filters, product. B. Calculate. Sales amount measure, remove filters, category column in product. C. Calculate. Sales amount measure, remove filters, brand column in product. D. Calculate. Sales amount measure, remove filters, year column in date. The correct answer is B. Calculate. Sales amount measure, remove filters, category column in product. Calculate evaluates an expression in modified filter context. Passing Remove Filters, Category column in Product, removes the filter from only the category column. So year, region, brand, and other filters remain in effect. Exam clue. With Calculate, scope a filter modifier to the narrowest table or column that must change. Table-wide removal can discard valid context unintentionally. Question 15. An import model contains 300 million website event rows at one row per event. All reports group visits by date, campaign, and country and use only event counts. Users do not need event, session, or user-level drill-through. You must reduce the fact table size while preserving the required analysis. Which action should you take? Answer choices. A. Add a date-calculated column to every event row and keep all event-level rows. B. Hide event ID, session ID, and university from report view while keeping the event-level table unchanged. C. Group the source data by date, campaign, and country, calculate the event count, and load the summarized result. D. Disable the auto date/time feature and keep the event level table unchanged. The correct answer is C. Group the source data by date, campaign, and country. Calculate the event count and load the summarized result. Pre-summarizing by the finest dimensions required for reporting raises the fact table grain and can remove a large number of imported rows. Because no finer-grained analysis is required, the grouped event count preserves the stated reporting capability. Exam clue. Choose a summarized grain that retains every dimension and metric required by reports, but no unnecessary detail below that grain. Question 16. A semantic model contains the explicit measures, revenue measure, margin measure, and units measure. Report authors must be able to show current, previous year, and year-over-year percentage for each measure. A marked date table is already related to the fact table. You want to avoid creating a separate time intelligence measure for every combination. What should you create? Answer choices. A. A calculated table containing one row for each measure name and time intelligence label. B. A calculation group with time intelligence calculation items that use selected measure and the calculation group column in a slicer or visual. C. A quick measure for every combination of base measure and time intelligence calculation. D. A field parameter that references 9 separately created time intelligence measures. The correct answer is B, a calculation group with time intelligence calculation items that use selected measure, and the calculation group column in a slicer or visual. Calculation groups reduce redundant measures by defining reusable DAX patterns as calculation items. Selected measure acts as the placeholder for whichever explicit measure is in context, and the calculation group column can apply an item from a slicer or visual. Exam clue. When the same calculation pattern must apply across many explicit measures, look for calculation items built around selected measure. Question 17. A support model contains one numeric value in the resolution minutes column of tickets per resolved ticket. Most tickets are resolved within 20 to 90 minutes, but a few outage tickets remain open for several days. You need a measure that returns the middle resolution time after the values in the current report context are ordered. Which DAX measure should you create? Answer choices. A. Typical resolution equals sample standard deviation resolution minutes column in tickets. B. Typical resolution equals max resolution minutes column in tickets. C. Typical resolution equals average resolution minutes column in tickets. D. Typical resolution equals median resolution minutes column in tickets. The correct answer is D. Typical resolution equals median resolution minutes column in tickets. Median returns the median of the numbers in a column. which is the middle value after the resolution times are ordered. That is the statistic explicitly requested, including when a few values are much larger than the rest. Exam clue. Translate the requested statistic precisely. Middle ordered value maps to median, arithmetic mean maps to average, maximum maps to max, and sample spread maps to sample standard deviation. Question 18. A semantic model has a valid date table named date and an existing shipment count measure. A report selection can end on any date. You need a measure that evaluates shipment count over the trailing 90-day interval ending on the latest date in the current filter context. Which DAX measure should you create? Answer choices. A. Rolling 90-day shipments equals calculate, shipment count measure, previous quarter, date column in date. B. Rolling 90-day shipments equals calculate, shipment count measure, date add, date column in date, -90 day. C. Rolling 90-day shipments equals calculate, shipment count measure, dates between, date column in date, date, year, max, date column in date, 1-1 max, date column in date. D. Rolling 90-day shipments equals calculate, shipment count measure, dates in period, date column in date, max, date column in date, -90 day. The correct answer is D. Rolling 90-day shipments equals calculate, shipment count measure, dates in period, date column in date, max, date column in date, -90 day. Dates in period returns a date set beginning at the specified anchor and extending for the requested number and type of intervals. Anchoring it on max, date column in date, and using -90 day creates the trailing 90-day interval, and calculate evaluates shipment count measure over that date set. Exam clue. For a rolling window, identify both the moving anchor date and the interval length. Shifting the current date set is different from constructing a trailing interval. You are halfway through the semantic model workbench. Keep separating relationship direction, filter context, calculation behavior, and storage decisions before choosing an implementation. Question 19. A semantic model has a category table with one row per category key. Sales contains many transactions per category key, and monthly targets contains many month rows per category key. A category slicer must filter both fact tables. Neither fact table should filter category or the other fact table. How should you configure the relationships? Answer choices. A. Create one-to-one relationships from category to both fact tables with both cross-filtering. B. Create many-to-one relationships with category on the many side and use single filtering from each fact table to category. C. Create one-to-many relationships from category to sales and from category to monthly targets, each with single filtering from category to the fact table. D. Create a many-to-many relationship directly between sales and monthly targets with both cross-filtering. The correct answer is C. Create one-to-many relationships from category to sales and from category to monthly targets, each with single filtering, from category to the fact table. Category key is unique in category and repeated in both fact tables, so category belongs on the one side of two one-to-many relationships. Single direction propagation from category filters each fact independently and avoids a path from either fact back to category or across to the other fact. Exam clue. When one conform dimension filters multiple facts, relate its unique key separately to each fact's repeated foreign key, using single direction one-to-many relationships. Question 20. A report author needs a weighted average of shipment cost per carrier. The author does not want to write the initial DAX manually, but must be able to inspect the generated DAX afterward and adapt it if the business rule changes. Weighted average per category is available in the built-in calculation list. Which Power BI feature should the author use? Answer choices. A. A quick measure configured as weighted average per category. B. A calculation group with an implicit measure as its target. C. A visual calculation stored separately on every visual. D. An implicit measure created by dragging shipment cost to a visual. The correct answer is A. A quick measure configured as weighted average per category. Quick measures include weighted average per category. The author supplies fields in the quick measure dialog, Power BI generates the DAX, and the resulting formula can be viewed and used as a starting point for further DAX work. Exam clue. Use a quick measure when the calculation appears in Power BI's supported quick measure categories, and you want generated inspectable DAX rather than only an automatic aggregation. Question 21. A sales table can contain several line rows for the same order. You need a measure that returns the median of the per order sales totals in the current filter context. The measure must first obtain the distinct order IDs, calculate a sales total for each order, and then take the median of those results. Arrange the DAX fragments in the correct order to create the measure. Available actions. A. Values, order 1 D column in sales. B. Median order value equals. C. Median X. D. Calculate sum sales amount column in sales. The correct order is first, B. Median order value equals minutes. Second, C. Median X. Third, A. Values, order 1 D column in sales. Fourth, D. Calculate sum sales amount column in sales. The completed measure is median order value equals median X, values, order ID column in sales, calculate sum sales amount column in sales. Values supplies one row per distinct order in the current context. Median X evaluates the second argument for each of those rows and returns the median. Calculate makes the current iterator row filter the sales rows used by sum. Exam clue. When the statistic is overgrouped results rather than a physical column, use an X iterator over a table at the required grain and evaluate the grouped expression inside it. Question 22. A model requires one common DAX date table that always covers January 1, 2024 through December 31, 2026, including dates for which no fact rows exist. The range must remain fixed even when new dates are loaded into other model tables. Which calculated table expression should you use? Answer choices. A. Date equals calendar auto. B. Date equals values order date column in sales. C. Date equals calendar date 2024 1/1 date 2026 12/31. D. Date equals distinct order date column in sales. The correct answer is C. Date equals calendar date 2024 1/1 date 2026 12/31. Calendar accepts explicit start and end values and returns the dates in that range, so it meets the fixed boundary requirement. Calendar auto-derives and can extend its range from dates stored in the model, while distinct or values of a fact date can omit dates with no fact rows. Exam clue. Choose calendar when the required start and end dates are explicitly defined. Choose calendar auto when the model's stored dates should determine the range. Question 23. A sales table has one units column. You need an explicit measure that adds the units values for the rows in the current report filter context. Which DAX measure should you create? Answer choices. A. Total units equals max units column in sales. B. Total units equals count units column in sales. C. Total units equals average units column in sales. D. Total units equals sum units column in sales. The correct answer is D. Total units equals sum units column in sales. Sum adds all numeric values in the specified column. Used as an explicit measure, the expression is evaluated for the current filter context supplied by the report. Exam clue. Translate the requested aggregation literally. Total numeric amount maps to sum. Row count maps to count. Mean maps to average. And largest value maps to max. Question 24. A flights table contains departure airport key and arrival airport key. Airport key column in airport has an active one-to-many relationship to departure airport key column in flights. And existing report visuals must continue to analyze flights by departure airport. You need a new arriving flights measure that uses the same airport fields to count flights by arrival airport. Users do not need to analyze departure and arrival airports simultaneously. Choose the two actions required to implement the measure and arrange them in the order in which they should be performed. Available actions. A. Add airport name column in airport and the arriving flights measure to a report visual. B. Deactivate the relationship from airport key column in airport to departure airport key column in flights. C. Create a second active relationship from airport key column in airport to arrival airport key column in flights, while leaving the departure airport relationship active. D. Create arriving flights equals calculate count rows flights use relationship arrival airport key column in flights airport key column in airport. E. Create a relationship from airport key column in airport to arrival airport key column in flights and leave this relationship inactive. The correct order is, first, E. Create a relationship from airport key column in airport to arrival airport key column in flights and leave this relationship inactive. Second, D. Create arriving flights equals calculate count rows flights use relationship arrival airport key column in flights airport key column in airport. The unused actions are A. Add airport name column in airport and the arriving flights measure to a report visual. B. Deactivate the relationship from airport key column in airport to departure airport key column in flights. C. Create a second active relationship from airport key column in airport to arrival airport key column in flights while leaving the departure airport relationship active. Keep the existing departure airport relationship active so it remains the model's default role. First, create the arrival airport relationship as inactive. Then, create the measure with calculate and use relationship so that the existing inactive arrival relationship is enabled only for that calculation. Adding the completed measure to a visual uses the measure but is not part of implementing it. Exam clue. When one dimension plays a secondary role only for a calculation, preserve the required active role. Create the secondary relationship as inactive and enable it inside calculate with use relationship. Question 25. You are editing a report in the Power BI service. After a slicer change, Performance Analyzer identifies the order detail visual as slow. You need to inspect the exact DAX query generated for that visual and the data returned by the query. When you expand the Visuals Performance Analyzer entry, the Run in DAX Query View action is not available. What should you do? Answer choices. A. Select Refresh Visuals in Performance Analyzer, select Open Data Model, and wait for the refreshed visual query to appear automatically as a query tab. B. Use Show as a Table for the visual, copy the displayed rows, select Open Data Model, and paste the rows into DAX Query View. C. Export the Performance Analyzer results to a JAN file. Select Open Data Model and run the exported JAN file in DAX Query View. D. Select Copy Query for the visual, select Open Data Model, open DAX Query View in the web modeling experience, and run the copied query. The correct answer is D. Select Copy Query for the visual, select Open Data Model, open DAX Query View in the web modeling experience, and run the copied query. In the Power BI service, Performance Analyzer doesn't provide the Run in DAX Query View action. Copy Query captures the DAX query generated for the visual. You can then select Open Data Model, open DAX Query View in the web modeling experience, and run the copied query. The results grid shows the data used by the visual, while the query text exposes the visual's query logic for investigation. Exam clue: distinguish the performance log from the visual query. In the service, use Copy Query to carry the exact visual-generated DAX into Web DAX Query View. Question 26. A semantic model has a valid date table named date and an existing sales amount measure. You need 3 time intelligence measures for different reporting requirements. Match each requirement to the DAX expression that implements it. Each expression can be used once. One expression will remain unused. Requirements. 1. Return sales accumulated from the start of the current month through the current date context. 2. Return sales for the same set of dates 1 year earlier. 3. Return sales accumulated from the start of the year through the current date context. Available targets. A. Total year-to-date sales amount measure, date column in date. B. Calculate sales amount measure, same period last year, date column in date. C. Calculate sales amount measure, date add, date column in date, -1 month. D. Calculate sales amount measure, dates month to date, date column in date. The correct matches are: Requirement 1 maps to D, calculate, sales amount measure, dates month to date, date column in date. Requirement 2 maps to B, calculate, sales amount measure, same period last year, date column in date. Requirement 3 maps to A, total year to date, sales amount measure, date column in date. The unused target is C, calculate, sales amount measure, date add, date column in date, -1 month. Total year to date evaluates the expression for dates from the start of the year through the current context. Same period last year shifts the current date set back 1 year. Dates month to date supplies the month to date date set to calculate. Date add by -1 month shifts to a previous month period and is not required here. Exam clue: classify the time request before choosing a function, accumulation window, equivalent prior year dates, and shifted interval are different mechanisms. Question 27. A shipments table contains shipped date and delivered date on each row. Report authors need 1 reusable transit days field evaluated for every shipment, stored at data refresh, and available on slicers and matrix rows. The value does not need to change when users interact with the report. Which calculation should you create? Answer choices. A. A measure. Transit days equals date diff, shipped date column in shipments, delivered date column in shipments, day. B. A calculated column. Transit days equals date diff, shipped date column in shipments, delivered date column in shipments, day. C. A calculated table. Transit days equals date diff, shipped date column in shipments, delivered date column in shipments, day. D. A separate visual calculation with the same date diff expression on each report visual. The correct answer is B, a calculated column. Transit days equals date diff, ship date column in shipments, delivered date column in shipments day. A calculated column evaluates a DAX expression row by row, stores the result in the model at refresh, and can be used in slicers, filters, rows, and columns. Date diff returns the number of interval boundaries between the two row dates, so day produces the required per shipment field. Exam clue. Choose a calculated column when the formula produces one refresh time scalar per existing row, and the result must behave as a reusable categorical or grouping field. Question 28. A semantic model contains a whole number badge number column in employees. Badge number is an identifier, not a quantity. When report authors add it to visuals, Power BI should not aggregate it by default, but the column must remain numeric for compatibility with the source system. Which column property should you configure? Answer choices. A. Hide the column from report view. B. Change the data type to text. C. Set the data category to web URL. D. Set summarize by to don't summarize, also labeled none. The correct answer is D. Set summarize by to don't summarize, also labeled none. The summarize by property controls how a numeric column is summarized by default. Setting it to don't summarize, also labeled none, preserves the numeric data type while preventing a default aggregation. Exam clue. When a numeric field is an identifier, separate its storage type from its default aggregation behavior and configure summarize by. Question 29. An inventory table stores daily units on hand snapshots by product and warehouse. A monthly matrix must sum units across products and warehouses, but display the inventory snapshot evaluated at the last date of each month. It must not add the daily snapshots across the month. The model has a valid date table named date. Which DAX measure should you create? Answer choices. A. Month-end units equals sum units on hand column in inventory. B. Month-end units equals closing balance month, sum units on hand column in inventory, date column in date. C. Month-end units equals total month to date, sum units on hand column in inventory, date column in date. D. Month-end units equals average units on hand column in inventory. The correct answer is B. Month-end units equals closing balance month, sum, units on hand column in inventory, date column in date. Closing balance month evaluates the supplied expression at the last date of the month in the current context. The inner sum remains additive across the product and warehouse rows on that date, while the closing balance function prevents snapshots from being added across dates. Exam clue. For snapshot facts, identify the dimensions that remain additive and the time boundary that is not. Evaluate the additive expression at the required closing date instead of accumulating dates. Question 30. A date table contains month label values such as Jan 2026, Feb 2026, and Mar 2026. A month sort key column in the same table contains 202601, 202602, and 202603. Month label currently appears alphabetically in slicers. Report authors should see month label in chronological order and should not use month sort key directly. What should you do? Answer choices. A. Set month sort keys sort by column property to month label, and then hide month label. B. Set month labels summarize by property to minimum, and hide month sort key. C. Set month labels sort by column property to month sort key, and then hide month sort key. D. Change month labels data category to time and leave month sort key visible. The correct answer is C. Set month labels sort by column property to month sort key, and then hide month sort key. A text label can be sorted by a suitable column in the same table. Configuring month label to sort by month sort key produces chronological order, and hiding month sort key keeps the helper field away from report authors. Exam clue. For labels that do not sort naturally, point the visible label's sort by column property to a same table numeric or date sort key. Question 31. In Power Query, the staging inventory query retrieves and cleans source rows. The final inventory query references staging inventory, performs the remaining transformations, and supplies the only inventory table used by the semantic model. Staging inventory is also being loaded as a separate model table, even though no relationship, calculation, security rule, or report uses it. What should you do to remove the unnecessary duplicate model data while preserving the transformation flow? Answer choices. A. Disable load for staging inventory and keep final inventory loaded. B. Hide staging inventory in report view and keep both queries loaded. C. Convert staging inventory to direct query while keeping final inventory in import mode. D. Disable load for final inventory and keep staging inventory loaded. The correct answer is A. Disable load for staging inventory and keep final inventory loaded. A Power Query query that exists only to support data integration for another query should not also load into the model. Disabling load for the staging query preserves its use by final inventory while preventing a redundant table and its rows and columns from being stored in the semantic model. Exam clue. If a Power Query query is only an intermediate dependency, keep the query but disable its load to the model. Question 32. A matrix displays revenue measure by country column in geography. A new measure should return revenue only when the current country context intersects France or Germany. It must not replace an existing filter on country column in geography. For example, the row for Canada should remain blank rather than be replaced by the combined France and Germany result. Which DAX expression should you use? Answer choices. A. Calculate. Revenue measure. Remove filters. Country column in geography. B. Calculate. Revenue measure. Country column in geography equals selected value. Country column in geography. C. Calculate. Revenue measure. Keep filters. Country column in geography in the set France and Germany. D. Calculate. Revenue measure. Country column in geography in the set France and Germany. The correct answer is C. Calculate. Revenue measure. Keep filters. Country column in geography in the set France and Germany. Keep filters changes calculates default behavior for the specified column. Instead of replacing the current country filter, the France or Germany set is intersected with it. A Canada row therefore has an empty intersection, while France and Germany rows retain their own country context. Exam clue. In Calculate, use keep filters when a new predicate must narrow the existing context by intersection, rather than overwrite that context. Question 33. An import model loads 8 years of fact sales data. Confirmed reporting requirements use only the most recent 36 months. The table also includes tracking token and raw payload columns that are not used by relationships, calculations, sort properties, row-level security, or reports. You must reduce the model size without removing required data. Which 2 actions should you take? Select 2 answers. Answer choices. A. Filter fact sales to the required 36-month period in the source query or power query. B. Hide tracking token and raw payload in report view while continuing to load them. C. Disable load for the fact sales query. D. Remove tracking token and raw payload from the query before the data is loaded to the model. The correct answers are A. Filter fact sales to the required 36-month period in the source query or power query. D. Remove tracking token and raw payload from the query before the data is loaded to the model. Loading only the required time range removes unnecessary rows, and removing unused source columns prevents them from consuming model storage. Both actions preserve the confirmed reporting requirements while directly reducing imported data volume. Exam clue. 4 import models reduce data vertically by removing unused columns and horizontally by filtering rows beyond the required scope. Question 34. An import model loads 1 row per sales order line. Most visuals show monthly sales by product, but a required drill-through page must display each order line ID and its amount for a selected customer. The proposed solution is to group the source data by month and product, sum the sales amount, and load only the summarized rows. Does the proposed solution reduce granularity while meeting all reporting requirements? Answer choices. A. Yes. B. No. The correct answer is B. No. The proposal would reduce row count by raising the grain to month and product, but it would discard order line ID and customer-level detail needed by the required drill-through page. Pre-summarization is appropriate only when the loss of finer detail is compatible with reporting requirements. Exam clue. Before raising a fact table's grain, identify the finest detail required by every visual and drill-through path. Summarizing above that level loses required capability. Before the final question, review the patterns you used. Define the correct grain, preserve required filter paths, choose the DAX function that matches the time or aggregation request, and optimize only after identifying the real bottleneck. Question 35. A report page becomes slow after a user changes the region slicer. You need to identify which visual causes the delay and determine whether its time is spent running the DAX query or drawing the visual on the screen. Which feature should you use first? Answer choices. A. DAX query view. B. Power query editor. C. Performance analyzer. D. Model explorer. The correct answer is C. Performance analyzer. Performance analyzer records report interactions by visual and breaks each visual's duration into categories that include DAX query and visual display. It is therefore the appropriate first tool for isolating the slow visual and the layer responsible for its delay. Exam clue. Start with Performance Analyzer when the question is which report visual is slow, or whether its delay is query execution versus rendering. You have completed all 35 questions in this semantic models, relationships, DAX, and performance practice session. Review any missed reasoning, then continue to the next PL-300 theme when you are ready.